Good evening. It's Saturday night, and you're listening to America Now, dedicated to the continuous search for truth. For those listening online at www.radioamericanow.com, and that's America with a K, or gcnlive.com, be sure to choose Channel 3 to listen to the entire show. As always, if you'd like to call in and ask a question or join in the discussion, please give us a call at 800-259-5791. Now, here's your host, Barb Adams.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining me this evening. Would you like to claim your power and create a life of authenticity and fulfillment while dissolving illusions and repatterning old wiring? There's a natural process of growth and realization. And my guest tonight, Neil Kramer, has written a book called The Unfoldment regarding this natural human process. Neil is a renowned English writer, philosopher, and teacher specializing in the fields of consciousness, metaphysics, and mysticism. He shares his path of transformation and empowerment in his writings, interviews, and lectures, as well as in his one-on-one teachings and group workshops. Neil's a frequent and popular guest on leading alternative radio and internet shows, and his acclaimed writings and talks attract large, discerning audiences around the world. If you would like more information about Neil Kramer and his new book, The Unfoldment, which will hit bookshelves May 22nd, please visit his website at neilkramer.com, and it's Kramer. Welcome to America Now, Neil.
Hi, thank you very much for having me with you.
Neil, I was looking over many of your works, and including parts of The Unfoldment that are available online on your website. And I'd have to say, it looks like you've been on your path of unfoldment, get that right there, for quite some time. Have you always had deep insight into both yourself and into how things work in the universe?
Well, I think we all do. And I think it's there from the beginning, from the moment we show up. The question is, how quickly do we make that part of our day-to-day existence? How soon do we choose to make that a serious part of our journey into the world? So, yes, I have, but only like everybody else has. And I think that the main thing is that somebody who chooses to spend time looking philosophically and spiritually and insightfully into themselves and the world and the relationship between the two, society isn't really set up to allow that to happen naturally. And so a lot of people think that it's odd to do something like that, to walk around pondering existence and thinking about different ways of looking at things. Is sometimes deemed a little eccentric these days. So I guess this book is my endeavour, really, to say no, it isn't unusual. It's completely normal, and in fact, it's very natural process, and it's very empowering process. And a lot of the little quibbles of life, and a lot of the unfulfillment and greyness and strangeness and drama of life that we don't necessarily understand, begins to become a lot more explicable when you engage with this internal path of, what is essentially, to use the spiritual language, ascendance, i.e. moving through increasingly refined modes of consciousness, shall we say.
So then, how would you describe the unfoldment? How would you term it? Is it more like metaphysics and spirituality equaling empowerment?
The unfoldment is essentially, the book is a number of contemplations about, as you say, consciousness, metaphysics, mysticism, very, very practical hands-on stuff, as well as very, very high-level stuff, very esoteric. The unfoldment, if you like, as a kind of verb or a noun, both of which are possible, I guess. The unfoldment is really about what I would say re-enchanting the world and the self in a very positive way. And it's a profound recognition that your own spiritual development is absolutely aligned with the growth of the universe, and it's absolutely relevant, and it's a purely legitimate task in life to go with that. So again, it's about a perspective shift. Say, this isn't some new age thing, this isn't some funny spiritual cult woo-woo nonsense. This is something that every man and woman is naturally drawn to, but it's fallen so out of favour and so distant from the mainstream narrative that usually the only time people get to touch such subject matters is on the fringe, where it can be a bit hit and miss, the kind of quality of people and information and knowledge that you get. So, as I say, this is my attempt to bring what I think are the core disciplines and the most relevant subject matters all to one place, and put that forward as a proposal to say, okay, if you read this and then go off and think about it and develop these themes in your own life, you're gonna be pointing in the right direction, and then it's up to you from there.
Neil, we were talking about society, and it seems like from the time we're born, we're taught that happiness is outside of us, and that we must become worthy to receive things that will make us happy. It's very frustrating because most people get trapped in this programming, and then they wonder why they have all of these things in their lives, but they're still not happy. And I heard you say that although they may get trapped in this, that call, that impulse to find the truth is still there within us. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's like a flame that never goes out. It's always there, and people can get very depressed or very diverted, and you can be like, a kind of Charlie Sheen, old-style decadent, and just be like prostitutes and cocaine. Or you could be running around the Amazon and Tibet and Egypt on, seemingly very high-level pursuits, but really, they're all distractions. They're all distractions from the inner work of unfolding your own truth and what you should be doing here and what you're about and your own divine lineage and so on. And I take a very harsh view, in a good way, that the old programming is completely within our power to just rip that out and start again. So some people find that very exciting because they're ready for change. So this is definitely a book that is aimed at, if you have the slightest inkling that it might be time to actually really do something, not in a distant, metaphorical, way, but actually literally it's time to change. This is a book for those people who feel that they might be stood on that precipice but aren't entirely sure what that change is, what the life change will look like, how they go about it, etc., etc. So it's a very accessible book, but I have tried to distill all the wisdom that I've gathered in my 40 years of existence into one place, basically to say you could potentially go off with this as a launch pad, not necessarily claiming that all the secrets of the universe are in it, although some of them are, perhaps, but it's definitely a signpost. It's the finger pointing at the moon, so once you get that, then you can go on your own journey.
All right. Well, we are heading into a break here. When we return, I'd like to talk more about this, and especially how people need to find more adventure and magic in their lives to help start this process of change. All right, America Now continues after this break. All right, my first guest this evening is Neil Kramer, and he's got a new book out, coming out actually on May 22nd. It's called The Unfoldment. Check it out when it gets out there, and I believe you can go on his website at neilkramer.com. You can preview a few of the chapters, a little bit of it there online. So go ahead and check it out, and when it's out in the bookstores, get yourself a copy if you are interested in becoming your authentic self. Neil, you were talking about adventure and magic, that we need to have more enchantment in our life. And I take that in two different ways. Yes, we need to find the mystery in life again, the become more in tune with things. But at the same time, when I hear enchantment and things like that, I immediately think two things. The history we're taught and the folklore, the enchantment, the truths that are out there that we have been told that are myths.
Yes, that's a very important point. I think if you speak to most people, whether they're 25 or 75, people like mystery and adventure, and they like a certain element of magic as well. And if we look at what that is, let's take magic for example. Magic is really an effect that we don't understand necessarily. It's like a technology that we don't understand that has a very miraculous or revelatory effect on the world. Something extraordinary happens. Of course, usually we like to divide it into white magic and black magic, positive and negative, good things and bad things. But magic, in a sense, is nowadays seen as something that where the physics is changed, is bent, is altered. And I think when you start to engage with the unfoldment, magic starts to reintroduce itself as a daily, weekly, monthly occurrence. And of course we all encounter little bits of magic now and again, like synchronicity, of sort of fabulous kind of coincidences, as somebody might think of it, occasional objects that we think have levitated, or we see something in the sky, and you see these little spontaneous things. You might see 4 or 5 of them in your life. When you engage with the unfoldment, and the book actually, believe it or not, is out right now, so I think it's in some of the physical bookstores, May 22nd, but on the online retailers, the big ones, it's out now, so if anyone wants to grab that, you can go and get it. In the book, I talk about how when you engage with this unfoldment, this process of self-learning and of expression, magic begins to happen more and more and more. And you actually reach a point where you have to take a decision on how much of it you can handle to some extent. So believe it or not, there comes a point in somebody's path of conscious evolution and of development where it's not just words on a page anymore. It's not just some nice ideas from somebody or some wisdom, some scripture, some classical sacred text repackaged for the 21st century. You actually start to see there's something changing in your life. You actually start to move in a different kind of world. The boundaries of your perceptions are pushed further back, and you see deeper, shall we say. You see more of the world. You see round the corner a little bit. You see over the horizon a little bit. And it starts to challenge what we've been taught about, what we're able to do and what we're not able to do. And I think that's a good motivator for a lot of people who have become a little bit disenfranchised from society, have lost faith in the government and the institutions, rather understandably I might say, and need to take control and need to form their own direction. They may still want a relationship with the divine, with God. They may still want good communities and all that, of course, but the power lies inside, nowhere else inside. But with that authority comes a certain amount of responsibility. So it's a little bit like saying, if you're going to train wizards, you need to make sure they have high conduct, good morals, good ethics, solid, emotionally secure, all these wonderful things that we want. Then the magic starts to happen, because of course beforehand you would end up in all kinds of scrapes and problems and accidental misdemeanors if you started wielding your magic and you were a bit messed up, shall we say.
Yeah, definitely. You know, you're talking about the magic, and I'm thinking shamanism as well. And in the past, Neil, in past times, you know, I'm thinking like Christianity was based in what? Hebrew mysticism, which was based in paganism, basically. But that in those times, the wizards, as you're talking about, those types of things, those were everyday occurrences. People had the elders, people they looked to, the wizards or whatever you want to call them. Those people were part of everyday society. Why did we get away from that? And when did we?
Well, yeah, let's imagine for a minute that you and I were to sit together in our little tower, our wicked tower, and decide to take over and control the people, the rabble, the unwashed masses. The first thing you do is you take the power and the knowledge away from them. And in the era before written communication, which was anything essentially before the 17th century, if you really want to be specific, it was all an oral tradition. So if you took the storytellers away and you took the oral tradition, the mystery schools away, you took away people's contact with spiritual heritage, essentially. So you could eliminate a certain number of individuals, take away their meeting places, and bring in a replacement. You bring in a replacement monotheistic Abrahamic religion, which, as we know, is in our part of the world is Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. All the same Abrahamic religions, essentially. They all go back to this central character, which is discussed in my book. And unfortunately, although there's many millions of wonderful people who take part in these religions, some people at the top, who we don't see on television, they're not names we know about, have carried on this element of control, and so pretty much the Christianization of Europe wiped out indigenous, shamanic, French, German, English, Welsh, Scottish and Irish sacred practices. It was seen as devilry, and anybody who took part in it was literally burnt at the stake or hung, drawn and quartered or drowned. And this went on for a long, long time, and started in the 12th century, and it went on until about the end of the 17th century, or thereabouts. And so even a few hundred years ago in Switzerland, they were still executing witches. And so that puts things in a frightening perspective, and of course over here you have the Salem witch trials and so on. And that's the kind of fear and philosophical naivety and spiritual bigotry that still persists today. So you could get a very moral Christian man or woman, talk to them about paganism, and they're going to turn the nose up.
All right, we will continue this discussion about the unfoldment with Neil Kramer after this commercial break. All right, we are talking about mastering emotional alchemy tonight, how to transform pain and embrace the flow of the universe. With my guest, Neil Kramer. His new book is The Unfoldment. Neil, when we left off, you were talking about fear, and, it seems like most people get stuck there. They get pulled into the influence of these controls that have been put out there in society. And I know for myself, I do it through meditation and Tai Chi and Qigong. I've been fortunate enough. I've allowed myself to go inside and do what I call the inside job. And I rarely feel fear. I think it takes a lot of courage, and people need to realize they become spiritual warriors along the path, don't they?
Yes, they do, and I'm glad you used that word, actually, because I think that in the New Age community, as it's been since the 80s or whatever, that war and warrior and master and command are kind of dirty words, really. And I think that the warrior mentality is very relevant to this whole endeavour of awakening oneself, which is a lifelong process. It's not a light switch moment. It takes a good 100 years, probably, and maybe a few thousand in its entirety. But yes, you have to have a warrior attitude. You have to be supple. You have to be strong. You have to be able to bend like a reed in the wind. You have to be strong like an oak tree in the wind. You need to have that full spectrum of abilities. And like any healer knows full well, that too is a very important thing to be able to bring into your armory, so to speak, is to heal yourself. Because if you're walking around with all kinds of traumas and baggage, and let's face it, we all have them, you need to know how to do something about that, how to release yourself from the anxieties and fears that usually you picked up in the first 7 to 14 years of your life as very, very young boys and girls, really. Unusually, that stuff absolutely gets wired in and stays there, and we keep running that old wiring. So part of the trick of awakening is to free up the consciousness that you spend on your own bad wiring, because we all do it, all of us. We need that consciousness. There's none to be wasted. So I share techniques and stories and ideas and principles of that, all those things, to say this wiring is really the ego's attempt to say, well, that hurt a long time ago, so I'll now set down some circuitry, in inverted commas, that will prevent us from facing any situation like that again. And when that wiring gets laid down, if you think about it, we're usually very young, and we're not very experienced, and we don't have a very sophisticated mental palate. So you have to go back like an electrician, crawl around the attic of your mind, locate the bad wiring and fix it. And it's not difficult to do, but it does take some courage. And I like what you say about the inside job or the inner job or whatever. Inner work is absolutely essential for this. There is no greater mystery and landscape and endeavour than working within. You can go on all the crazy adventures you want around the planet, diving in the sea, jumping off mountains, meeting gurus and teachers and levitating through the forest. Good luck to you. You can do all those things, wonderful. But until you do the inner work, until you start the unfoldment, then you're always going to be on the back foot, and it's always going to catch up with you as well. So I'm quite firm on this, that there's no time like the present. Make hay while the sun shines. So 2012 is a great time to do this, because there is a lot of support from the universe for this process, because guess what? The universe is doing it itself as well. And when we align our unfoldment with the universe's unfoldment, that's when the magic starts.
Yeah, Neil, you're talking about the universe, and it teaches us, doesn't it? Do you think that the universe has its own teaching mechanism, such that if we're really not getting it or not doing the growth, then the universe is going to kind of force you into situations where you're not going to be able to basically ignore those types of things you need to be working on?
Barb, that is so funny. I can absolutely tell that you know the answer to that question before you ask it. It's so funny. It absolutely does that, because, as you know, if you ignore a little problem, it comes back again. And if you keep ignoring it, it comes back as a medium-sized problem. And you ignore that, and it comes back as a big problem, and so on, until eventually this giant rhinoceros runs at you head-on and knocks you flying and knocks your teeth out, and you break your ankle and goodness knows what. The universe won't let you get away with anything, and even if you make it to the finish line, death, and you've not done your work, guess what? It's snakes and ladders. You'll get on the helter skelter, come right back to the start, in a new life, in a new body, with a new narrative, with a new script, with a new director, but guess what? You're doing exactly the same thing over again until you figure it out and do it. So you have to take the reins of your own life. You have to take command of yourself and say, okay, I'm going to treat this seriously. I'm actually going to do this thing. I'm going to completely own my experience here. And when you start to fix these little quibbles and you start to develop more strength, more power, more emotional alchemy, that is, not being afraid of emotions, any kind of emotions, letting them come in, but expressing them and processing them appropriately. When you learn those things, less and less and less is scary in life, and more and more and more is possible. And the only fears we really have are the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling backwards. That's it. Every other fear we have is learned and is a mind construct. We only have two, and they're there to protect us, our bodies. Let's keep those two, because they have a handy purpose. The other ones, we can do away with them. We can actually start to rewrite that code and do something else, because keeping fear and anxiety inside yourself takes juice, it takes energy. And my work in the unfoldment, in the book, and in the teaching that I do one-on-one is to release that consciousness from that negative, unnecessary maintenance and free it up for more expressive, open, creative, evolving purposes.
Neil, as we release this fear in our lives, do you feel that the universe, you mentioned the magic before, we see things more like synchronicity everywhere, more and more in our lives, but does the universe also allow us to access things like the wisdom from the universe much more easily as we continue to unfold?
Yes, it does. The universe is like your favorite teacher at high school. It's very supportive. It's very encouraging, and as it starts to see that you are developing and learning, it starts to provide additional resources for that keen student, if you like, ourselves. And so you get lucky breaks, you make contact with excellent people, you start to realign relationships, you start to have the kind of experiences that you want, you start to feel the way you'd like to feel. And the universe does this to say, look, you don't need to pursue happiness, that's irrelevant. Happiness will come to you when you're aligned with universal unfoldment. It's a natural human thing, very easy happiness. Don't run after it, that's silly. Does a flower try and be beautiful? No, it just is. Similarly with humans, we create, generate, echo, mirror happiness very effortlessly, but it's only there abundantly when we are aligned with the universe's own evolution, its own growth, this huge ecology of Earth and the other planets and the trees and the rocks and the humans and everything, the whole system is evolving. It's an emanation, a divine emanation, I might say. If that's my personal view, then that's okay. This emanation is constantly refining itself, constantly learning about itself, this universal creation, this universal experiment. And we're part of that. We're actually right in the middle of it.
All right, we will continue this discussion with Neil Kramer here on America Now after this break. Stay tuned. All right, claim your power. Create that life that you want. Be fully alive. Open your heart. Live fearlessly, with courage. Be a spiritual warrior. My guest tonight is Neil Kramer. He's got a great new book coming out, The Unfoldment. You can get it on his website, Amazon.com as well, and it'll hit the bookshelves on May 22nd. Neil, we were talking about divine emanation, where we're talking about everything evolving together, the universe and all of us. We're expressing and expanding. And I'm thinking here, okay, we're all doing this. We are all part of one. Are we also doing this in parallel lifetimes and as well? I mean, this is a long process then, right? This is happening ongoing in parallel lifetimes and over a long period of time.
Yes, once again, Barbara, Barb, I beg your pardon. I can tell that these are things close to your heart. Yes, I think it is. I think it is very much a parallel thing. I don't think it's linear like the kind of old school view of karma and reincarnation, and you keep getting better and better, and you come back 50 million times and eventually get it right, and then off you go and graduate. I don't think it's quite like that. I think there are a lot of parallel resonances in our lives, and there are a lot of parallel lives all playing out at the same time. I think that anybody who gets deeply into spiritual reflection, personally, metaphysically, etc., you come to the understanding that linearity and, sequential 1, 2, 3, 4, all that starts to break down, really. And our whole notion of time starts to disappear. And as soon as you move into this, what I would call this fourth density state, the state that consciousness operates in, temporality, the normal passage of time, ceases to be, really. So even getting out of this third density state of flesh and blood and rock and tree, which is very beautiful and very necessary, but it's a training ground. And here, time, talk about the universal tutoring mechanisms, polarity is one of negative and positive, time is another. And as far as I could say it, if someone were to say, what is time? And that was my exam question, I'd say, time is an opportunity to track the effects of your consciousness on yourself and the world. That's what it does. It gives us a moment to sequence everything that we think, feel, everything that we create, everything that we destroy. And with time, we get to place how that's happened, how things affect each other, their influence. As soon as you start to grasp that and get the principle of it, then time becomes less and less necessary. And in fact, as you spiritually become more astute and as you gain more attainments in the old-fashioned sense in a way, which is okay, I think, time actually compresses and you begin to move in a slightly different world to other people. Time is relative, and it's perfectly acceptable even within physics, and time is experienced differently on Venus and Earth and Andromeda and the Pleiades or wherever, then it's all relevant. as your spiritual attunement increases, your consciousness refines, and it doesn't need time in the same way. So time zips past, absolutely zips past, yeah? And the only way to counter that, really, is to anchor yourself in the moment, and there's reasons and techniques, of course, that we know about to do that. But if you start to feel that time is zipping away and you're running through life and your hair's going grey and you're thinking, goodness me, what's happening? That's part of the learning process. That's part of understanding the absolute beauty of mortality, the wonderfulness of going through this sequence and then coming out the other side and thinking, goodness me, what a ride, what an incredible learning exercise that was. That was astonishing. And you have to embrace it fully. You have to really sink your teeth into it. And that's when the fear goes away about the aging process and about mortality. It becomes very beautiful, in fact. It becomes exquisite.
Yeah, all of life is beautiful. You see everything very differently. The entire perspective changes, and you understand this is all part of the process. We are all part of this, and it's a beautiful process. You know, Neil, you were mentioning something, too, before when you were talking about creation and destruction and things like that, and it's about, I guess I'd have to say, isn't it more about the intimate relationship than about the light and the dark, creation, destruction? It's understanding the balance in all things.
It is rather like time when we begin to peer into the strangeness of polarity, of good and bad, negative and positive, up and down, feeling great, feeling awful, elation, depression. We all feel those things. You think, well, why the hell is it like that? Why is one day good and the next day, for no apparent reason, just bloody awful? You know, why do these things happen? And again, that's part of the teaching mechanism. And once you start to get into it, and this is discussed very much in my book, once you start to grasp the reason for it, once more you begin this process of reconciliation and integration. And as before, the necessity of polarity as a teaching mechanism to bounce around from, you know, wonderfulness to dreadfulness, it becomes less and less necessary. So you start to steer your own course, and then eventually there's no need for polarity anymore, and you get back to this unitary state, not only in consciousness, but also in your experiences. And anyone who is familiar with, you know, astral projection or fourth, fifth density travel, whatever, a little bit esoteric perhaps, but they will tell you, those people, that polarity doesn't quite work in the same way there. And in fact, after a fifth density state, I can map this very nicely into physics for anyone who is worried by that language, but we won't bother with that for now because we haven't got time. But as you fire out from the fifth density state, you cannot go past it with polarity. That doesn't happen. So there's no ascension on a negative path. There is none. And so fundamentally it's a very optimistic story, because anyone who's gone down the negative path eventually realizes it's a dead end and has to backtrack and has to gain this wholeness of well-being in their actions and in their way they deport their own mind, in the way they carry themselves in the world, in the way they create, finding this equilibrium of balance, of creation, of destruction. Some things need to be broken, other things need to be made to replace them, however.
Neil, we're just about out of time. We've only got a couple of minutes left here. Why don't you go ahead and tell us again about your website, book, and as well any upcoming workshops or anything like that?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, the book is called The Unfoldment. It's out now. It's in the bookstores on May the 22nd, but you know, the major online retailers, you can get it right now. People are already reading and enjoying it, and glad to say. My website is neilkramer.com, Kramer with a K. I will be appearing at the 2012 Global Transformation Conference, which is on my website with many other wonderful speakers there. I have a workshop following that, and again you can see details of that, a special unfoldment workshop, full-day workshop. There's lots of interesting things on the website, essays, lots and lots of interviews. This one will be joining them very soon. I do one-on-one coaching work as well. That's half my time basically doing that. And anyone who's interested, if you go over to neilkramer.com, you will see all you need to see right there.
And as far as the one-on-one sessions, can they just sign up online then with you and find out the costs and all of those things?
Yes, there's a page online, it's called Teaching, and you go in there and you can look at it and how that works. There's like remote sessions, there's personal kind of face-to-face sessions, and you can find out the details from there and get a good feel for it online. And if that's something you feel is a good way forward for you, then yeah, brilliant, you can take that up.
Okay, and I was just looking at those, excuse me, the inner work, self, intellect, and spirit, inner and outer healing, comprehending the mystical emotional centeredness, light and dark dynamics, and claiming internal power. All great things. Check them out, people, and get the book, The Unfoldment, Neil Kramer. And Neil, thank you so much for joining me this evening. I'd love to have you back on again in the future.
Thank you, Barb. I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And yeah, we'll talk again soon.
All right, thank you. All right, everybody, stay tuned. America Now continues with Robert Taylor, A New Way to Be Human, coming up in the next hour. Stay tuned.